as a victim of severe child abuse and abandonment, and went into the foster care system, became a social worker, a foster parent, an adoptive parent, and now a published author of the book, Finding Hope, The 12 Keys to Healing from Hardship, Hurt, and Sorrow. So Amber, unmute yourself and talk to us about Finding Hope.
All right, well, awesome. I'm excited to be here. I really want to just say that the book, this is it, it's real. I had to tell somebody this the other day, that it's a real book. Maybe I was me in the mirror I was telling, I don't know. And the thing about hope is what is it? What is hope? It's because this isn't really about the book. The book is a great tool, and I want us to all be able to share it and touch lives. But it's really about what hope is. And hope is the belief that there will be greater things, that there's a future. And how many of you, in whatever positions you've been in, have needed to have hope? Yeah, he's shaking his head. Yes, some of us are like, I don't know how you're talking about it yet. So, Rhonda, I know I have. And when most people look at me and they don't know anything about my story or what I've came through, and it's something where I get to tell them that hope was the tool that continued to get me through, and hope from a greater being and a great God, and hope from people like you, and the little things. And so I share that in the book. So if it works for you all, if you have questions as we go through, please let me know. But I was just going to talk to you a little bit about what the book is and what it entails. So this is a self-help book, and it is printed by Hatherley Press in New York. And so it's nice to have an editor in there that can give that information and be able to provide resources for me to get it out to people in need. So who are those people? Any of us who's going through hardships. Anybody experienced COVID? Yeah. Just the environment of COVID is very stressful. No matter where you stand on anything, it's impacted our world. It's impacted our lives. And so we have to find hope and resiliency to make it through that. So that's why I kind of say this is relatable to anybody. On the back of the book, it talks about what it is. It's building your personal resilience and helping you develop an extensive toolkit of active coping skills. And so there's a couple different ways you could use it. Just self-care, but also as a reflection in groups, or depending on what population you serve, it can be great for that. And so the first part of the book is where I get to talk about my concept of life is tough. I know, if anybody knows me here, and Rhonda might be laughing, and I have a gal right here beside me, I am not life is tough, I can't make it through kind of person. I'm kind of bubbly, the ones that people like my husband throw paper at, and they're like, shh, in the background. Do we know those people? Well, I am one of those people. And so when my first chapter of life is tough, people are kind of surprised, like, that's kind of a pessimistic statement. But what I talk about in the book is it's not pessimistic, it's realism. And for us to be able to manage the challenge of facing life, we have to come to the acceptance. That doesn't mean, and it talks about this in the book, that doesn't mean the joy that life is tough, or even the pleasure in the fact that life is tough. It's just the acceptance thereof, that life is tough. We are people who make mistakes and have challenges, and that's what we talk about. And so in this one, the way I learned about it was when I was 12 years old, and I had a friend come in next door, and this was my first friend. I mean, this was pretty cool because I had a friend, and I was very committed to this friend. And so for the first time, that person motivated me to realize I wanted to be somewhere different than where I was, which was at my dad's house, where I would be locked in a room. And I'd been in and out of foster care most of my life, but at this point I would be isolated in the room. And when my dad said I needed to come inside, I was having too much fun, I wasn't allowed to hang out with this friend. I felt this commitment to this friend, this new friend. See, sometimes the little things that we do can be very impactful in the lives that we change, because they, as neighbors, said to me that day, "You matter and you're my friend." I don't know if anybody that's listening here has maybe said that to somebody and not realized how impactful that is to making the acceptance that life is tough come to reality, to where they persevere and make it tolerable. Because that's what happened to me. And so for the first time, I realized I mattered to somebody, and I had that self-worth that we all are deserving of. And so I was this mere 12 years old, and I realized I wanted to be a friend with this gal. And so I ran away that night, and I was going to go live over there forever and ever and ever. And it was all going to be beautiful. Sharon, you smile as if you've heard this before in the mind of people from hard places. And so what I realized that night was, when they took me to that police station, that life is tough, right? But tough does not mean it's the end. Whether it's COVID, whether it's health, whether it's medical, whether it's financial, whether it's your history, whether it's your future, whatever, the acceptance that it's tough doesn't determine that that's how it will stay. Because the second chapter that I talk about is the realization that tough is tolerable. And we have to then take that belief and provide that to those we work with, and hold this to ourselves. I'm a big advocate of self-care. And so learning that it's tolerable, even if it is challenging. And the story that I talk about in there is when I was in foster care. See, I thought foster care was going to save me and it was going to be great. And then I realized we aren't going to save. God saves. We just give the blessings to get them there. And while I was in foster care, I was in a very dysfunctional home, and I talk a little bit about this. This isn't a memoir, it is a self-help book, but I do talk about how dysfunctional the home was, but how I came to the realization that dysfunction is still functionable, and the resiliency we find in that. I talk about how believing that tough is tolerable builds strengths, gives perspective, and teaches perseverance. And so from the first one, we're accepting that we can get motivation that life is tough, but then the next step is that tough is tolerable. And I know that everybody has a story that they can share about that. So before I go on, I'm going to tell you a couple of other quick things about this book that's kind of unique to it. It's an easy read. I don't think it's a challenging read. And I have this cool concept at the end of each chapter. If you can see it on the screen, this is from chapter 1, and it's called Lessons to Learn. And so at the end of each chapter, there's a self-reflection, and it has a reflect, a plan, and a takeaway for each chapter. So for instance, I was just telling you, believing that tough is tolerable. And so the reflect on that is, I encourage everybody to have a journal, or, I mean, who writes on paper anymore? I guess a cell phone. Oh, Rhonda, you do. I was talking about those things we call cell phones, and we type them in there and then we read them later. Yes. So have those. If you're talking to somebody under 21, you tell them to bring those. And I say, write these down and write your responses so you can reflect on them. So the first one, this is just one example, is the reflect. So reflect on a challenging time in your life you felt would never pass or change. Haven't we all had that? And so reflecting on one specific thing. And then the plan is, identify a specific strength or skill you held at that time and how it equipped you to make it through. And so a self-reflection and really identifying, in that situation, how did I make it through that? Because we've all had challenges. And then a takeaway. And that is an action. I really feel like we have to take an immediate action and commit to something. So sometimes people will just do one of these. I have a person that works at a school, struggles with anxiety, and they just do one of these every morning. They read one of them in the morning. So write down at least one specific compliment for a time when life was tough, but so were you. Anybody thinking of a compliment in their mind to give to themselves? Stephen, feel free to chime in, man. And then I want you to plan to use that in the upcoming month. Use your strength, because that begins to use these concepts in our life. So when we accept that life is tough, which was chapter 1, and now how do we make it tolerable? We take it into action, into real life, which isn't that what Love is Action is all about? So
Yeah.
what a joy to be able to see that. Yeah. So Rhonda, I'm going to say just a couple more things on the book, and then we'll do questions, thoughts, funny jokes, whatever you all want to do. And but please chime in as you choose. So the third chapter that I talk about, and this is one I get the most feedback from actually thus far, is what's called Find Your People. And your is emphasized, because what I talk about is identifying who our people particularly are and what really defines my people. I think so much in this world we are missing some of the basic skills of healthy relationships, and the difference of what relationships are: personal relationships, professional, spiritual, intimate, and what the difference between all of that really is. And so it's finding your people that can give you those skills, but also carry healthy relationships with. So in this chapter, I talk about a really fun story, right? Fun, because you know it's funny, and the puns are wonderful in this. And what I talk about is when I was a preteen and I joined a family. I know some of you are just dumbfounded, like, whoa, somebody took a teenager. I know. I prayed for them too, but they were going to take me into their home, right? And here I was as a preteen thinking of, I went around and I would ask people if they would adopt me. I would go to church, I'd be in a sporting event, I'd like pass you on the street and I'd be like, Stephen, you look cool, man. Do you have an extra bed in your house? I know you, we're friends. I could come live with you, right? So I wanted to be wanted, and don't we all? Even as adults, don't we all? And so that's how I expressed it, is I was go around and ask, and I was very vulnerable. I could have ended up in a very unhealthy situation. But instead, what I discovered was my people through church. I was going to a church in my community in the foster home. We had 2 rules in the foster home. We had to go to church and we had to go to school. And I hated both the rules, just so you know. I was not going to break rules though. So I went and I met this lady there who showed up at my door this day when I was 15 years old. And she was saying, we would like for you to join our family. And what was really cool about her was she taught me that she was going to love me no matter what, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they lived back in my hometown that I hadn't faced in 4 years. I had quite a reputation. I know some of you are looking at me like, what, you? But I had a sticky finger, and I had a not kind mouth that wasn't always honest. And so I had a reputation in that town, and they lived in that town. And this would mean that I would be going back to that town. And by the way, I needed braces. I didn't have clean clothes. I had all these stereotypes. And so you know what I did with this gal? Her name was Kim, who said, I want you to join my family with 2 younger kids and my husband in your hometown. I gave her a list of every reason she should not take me. Yeah. And, the reason I did that is because I didn't know if I was going to be good enough, but we all want to be wanted, like I said. And see, here's the cool thing about your people, whoever your people are for you, which it doesn't have to be this extreme of a situation. It could be a little thing, but your people are those who will hold you to a higher standard, who will say, I love you unconditionally, but who will also hold you accountable. And that's what she would do for me. She would say, you need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps when I was at school and scared to go to school because of my older siblings. And she didn't say it in a cruel way or a harsh way, because she put it with a statement of, because I believe you can. But she said, you have more power than you give yourself credit for. That's what our people are about. They're not going to be the ones who coddle us. They're not going to be the ones who offend us or impede on us. They're going to be the ones who encourage us and know what we are capable of becoming and help us create that path. It was a really powerful thing that they taught me in the smallest moments. And that is the quote I have in there, that she rolls her eyes at me now whenever she reads it. She's like, I did not say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And I'm like, yeah, you did, at least in my book, on my perception of a teenager. But it was a great, great thing. And that's what finding your people about. I wonder how many of us, even as adults, as caregivers, as social workers are wounded warriors ourselves for the most part in human services, don't have our people. And it could really equip us to become better professionals also, which impacted my life. Those professionals who showed up at my door when I was 12 and I realized life was tough, I remember them too. And I knew them as adults. They were impactful to me. So you are very impactful. I'm going to go over 2 more chapters because the first 5 chapters are what I call the core concepts of the book, meaning these are the first areas we need to work towards growing in to really fulfill the others, because the others are a little more touchy maybe, or a little more vulnerable in our lives. So number 4 is seeking knowledge. Yeah, so some of us think of school and we're like, checking out, done with it. Well, the thing I say in this is ignorance is not an opt-out. We can be ignorant in the world, but the world is still going to happen. We can be ignorant about challenges and blessings, but they're still going to happen. And we have the power to do great things by gaining knowledge about it, how we can use our skill sets, our people, finding our people to help us find those. And so I talk about this of my mother's mental health and mental illness. So right now, in World Health Organization, before COVID, said about 70% of Americans struggled with anxiety. And I suspect that the number is significantly higher now that COVID on its second round is coming. And so anxiety is a real deal. And the extended factors of that, especially those from hard places, is mental illness. And so when I was 14, I went to live with my mother, who lived out of state. I didn't even know there was other states. It's good to know this, by the way, to teach your kids that there are other states. I'm from Kansas, center of the place, and so I didn't look much further than that. And it's a big world out there, which is a blessing as much as a curse. But I got to go to Kentucky. And when I was in Kentucky with my mother, I realized that mental illness is a real deal. And she struggled with bipolar, which at the time was called manic depression. And her husband had struggled with schizophrenia. And so being able to be an equipped parent for myself and my step siblings when you're struggling with mental illness is a really big deal. And also having a teenager come into your life that you hadn't connected with since very young was challenging. But see, it's not just about mental illness in this chapter. Seeking knowledge, we have all that responsibility, because I could be very lost as an adult now with resentment as a social worker trying to fix mental illness in child welfare with kids, when I work with kids, being biased with myself. I mean, there's genetics that role in this. And if I hadn't gained knowledge of what that was, of what mental illness is, the factors of it, how I can set boundaries, how I can create opportunities, then I don't know that I would have the type of healing that we all are valuable enough to have from our hardships. I don't think I'd be able to do what I do. And so gaining that knowledge about whatever it is, whether it's finances, whether it's spiritual well-being, because in this, I touch on spiritual well-being just a bit. My mother was of a very different faith than I, and so that caused a lot of tension. And so there was a part of in the mental and spiritual wellness, which is the wholeness that we have to have for the best versions of ourselves. that I had to discover and I had to learn about. And I had to ask questions from people like Stephen over there who's in ministry, and yell at them and argue with them and learn, because knowledge is that powerful. And so continually seeking the knowledge, and the things that we're frustrated with might be a guidance to what knowledge we need to gain. Maybe that's something to jot down and say, oh, if this is triggering an emotion, let me learn about it before I assume about it. Okay. And that's releasing the power from my mother's mental illness and giving it back to me. And we're all worthy of that. And then the last chapter I'm going to go over is called Learn from Your Past. Ugh. Okay, this is a hard one, because some people are like, I'm going to get over my past. I'm not going to talk about my past. I'm fearful of my past. There's a whole lot of components to that. And this isn't an all or nothing, but in some tone of wholeness and healing to the best versions of ourselves, we have to learn from our past. That doesn't mean agree with our past. It doesn't mean liking our past. It doesn't even mean sharing our past to other people, but it's being aware and accepting what it was and having the power to change it to something different, or keeping it the same. I mean, some of us are like, Mom and Dad, thank you so much. That was beautiful. And I want to mimic it. And our personalities come in line and we need to check that. Other times we want to make it very, very different, but we have to decide what we want to keep and what we want to throw out in our past, because we often are so stuck in resentment or anger or sadness or shame, so much shame in the hearts of those from hard places, that we lose the worth we have when we're stuck in the past. And so accepting and learning, ooh, this was helpful, this was not, is a very powerful thing. And for me, that was when I went back to high school in my hometown. And I presumed that people wouldn't like me, that I wouldn't be able to make it, that there was all these rumors about me, because assumptions, carry us very easily into challenges. And then I found out that a lot of it was assumption. And I was an emotional, I know, don't tell a teenager, but I was an emotional teenager. Shh, I don't know the secrets that we know as adults, but it's okay that we can be there and help them learn, that we can help them get past this, through this, and then deal with it so that they can continue. And us as adults, how much baggage do we carry? When I worked in social work, there was times when I would relate to a case and I realized, man, I have a lot of baggage. I have things that I probably need to work through and get through. And I actually went to school as a social worker in reintegration. And so I worked in child welfare, and I talk about that in this book. I'm going to read you a quote. At the beginning of each chapter, I do a quote. And this one says, "There is no undoing it. There's only learning from it, being strong because of it, and moving forward to better it." Amelia Hutchins wrote that. And that's about how our history will mold us, but it doesn't control us. And the history that we carry and that you carry can equip us to persevere, actually. It gives us skills, Rhonda, that might be from your book. It gives us skills to actually persevere, but we have to be willing to open that door with a safe place. And so when I went back to school as a sophomore, and I had older siblings that were very resentful and angry for their own reasons towards me, I had to really face that and believe that I can be stronger than the past, letting the past define me. So I know you don't want me to stop, but we can only concentrate for a certain amount of time, especially those from hard places, without a change in interaction. And so I think we should change it up and have some conversation. What I will tell you is there's only 12 chapters. Like I said, it's a simple read. You could, some days I need to go back and read a chapter. I'm like, okay, I'm really on believing tough is tolerable today. And when I was on a flight yesterday, I needed to know that, whew, this is tolerable, right? And so sometimes we got to go back But the next chapters I'll go over before questions. Chapter 6 is facing your fears. And I talk about what fears are and acknowledging, exploring them, and challenging them. I had epilepsy, and I didn't find out until I was almost a young adult after foster care, and it was from child abuse. And so facing the fears and where's the underlying, and then sharing your wisdom. And this is how your story helps someone. And everybody that's here, you have a story. Anybody that's listening, you have a story. And so doing those five first ones and then equipping yourself to share your story, that's how I can share with you. And I pray that it blesses you in some way, but you have a story too that is reciprocal to me. And so learning to share your story and creating change, acknowledging our strengths and weaknesses. I almost took the and weakness part off because I was writing to myself, but then I thought, okay, I should probably say that I have a weakness too. And my husband agreed, and my kids, well, they agreed loudly. So I thought I'd go ahead and put it on there. Creating a life you love, not anybody else loves, not that your fears love, not that dollars love, but that you love, because that will fulfill the rest. Being aware of our bias, because we each have those. Freedom to forgiveness. I leave that as the last chapter before the last chapter for a reason. Forgiveness is a very challenging thing, and sometimes it might be a lifelong process, and that's okay. But seeking to find that freedom in it. And then last but not least is hope is an art form. I get the question about what do I think of hope a lot. Hope is the belief in a greater opportunities, but for each of us, it's just so different. We are creators and artists of our own in the type of hope that we bring to life and what it shows from us. And it's a beauty to each our own. And so for that, I am so excited to share hope, finding hope for anybody who it could possibly touch. So Miss Rhonda, that's a long, short summary of the first 5 chapters.
I love it. I love it, Amber. I'm so glad that you invested the time, especially, while you work full time at, I don't know, what do you have, like 7 jobs or something like that, and took over as chairperson and our fearless leader of Successful Survivors Foundation. And there's that little thing about raising those 2 little humans and being a great wife and, all the things that you do. It's amazing that you found the time to write the book and share what you know, for sure. I always want to encourage people, like you said, we all have a story. I think also there are messages that are entrusted to us that come to us through our unique experiences. And it's what we know for sure. Like, we've lived it. Nobody can talk us out of it. This is, we know what we know. And you shared that here. And I love that, that you made yourself vulnerable and, you shared some of your story. And like you said, it's not an autobiography, but, the thing is, our stories are the examples that support the things that we know for sure. And so I love that you shared some of your story to just, make those points and really communicate those points. So I want to hear what everybody else has to say too. But I have to say, the one thing, it all strikes me, I think it's all great. But if somebody were to only take one of the 12 keys and incorporate that into their life right now, I would say, for me, I think the most profound key is find your people. For me, I know you were, what were you, 12 years old when you had your first friend, and I was 14. And it was a girl I met in the first period of the first class, first day of high school. And she spoke to me like she spoke to everybody else, totally disregarding that my clothes were dirty and didn't fit and my hair was dirty and we didn't have a shower. We didn't have, I taking a shower was like, I didn't even know that people took showers. I was just dirty and I smelled. The people I lived with smoked a combined 6 packs of cigarettes a day. So I was like that character in the Peanuts that just has the cloud, around him, just filthy dirty. And this girl didn't even notice that. Like, she didn't acknowledge. She just spoke to me the same way she spoke to everybody else. And she became my person. And she was a very important part of my life until the day she passed. And she still is. I hear her in my head all the time saying, "You got this. You can do that. Why would you think you can't?" I wasn't going to go to college because I couldn't understand how I could possibly do that. And she's like, "Are you kidding me? What's wrong with you?" Like, it was that, like you said, it's not always, sometimes it's people calling you out, but in a gentle, loving way. It's like, are you kidding me? You can do that. Whatever it was I said that I didn't think I could do, that's what would come out of her mouth. "What's wrong with you? You can do that. That's nothing for you," And so when we have our people, oh man, it's like a life preserver in the ocean. So the ocean is still making waves and, tossing you all over. But when you have at least one person in your life that you can call and just say, "Oh, it was a horrible day. This is what happened," and they'll just hear you and they'll listen to you and they still love you no matter, how much of a knucklehead you are and, whatever. It helps you get through. So anybody who wants to speak, you can unmute yourself and ask a question or make a comment. Yes, Pastor.
Okay. I was listening to everything. Can I ask, first of all, Amber, you said you and your mother had different faiths?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did.
What can you tell me the background?
Sure. Yeah. So my mother identified as Jehovah's Witness. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I am a Christian. And so it was very challenging, the language overlap and the values. So.
I fully understand because I deal with Jehovah's Witnesses a lot. And I know their background and everything. So I know what you went through on that. Okay, as you know, I come from a spiritual background, actually not a spiritual background. I'm involved in ministry and getting people to plug up to God, connect with God. I was not raised in a church. I was, as a matter of fact, my family was poor. We weren't, I haven't been involved with foster kids, except when I was working in Claremont, California, at a place where we gave food, clothing, and furniture to needy families. In that, there were a lot of foster kids coming in. And one was kicked out of this home because he turned 18. And I really felt bad for him. I didn't know what could be done for him. And I'm talking about in relation to the system, what can be done in relation to the system. I was searching out to say, what can we do to help this kid out? There was nothing that could be done that I knew of. I just pray that he got himself together, and I believe he did. I was there and I would help people physically, but also presented the gospel to people. I'll say this, I kind of, as I was listening, I kind of pulled the blame on the religious leaders of the churches and all. They're supposed to teach the people. I did pastor for a few years, for actually almost 30 years. And I didn't want to do that. They are supposed to teach the people and disciple them that they can raise their kids and all properly. And I find that, and I'm still finding this, that the leadership is just all into themselves and just pleasing people, and the world is going to hell. and what you all are going through and everything. I'm saying this is what's happening because there are no, I mean, there is, but generally there is not the spiritual leadership that needs to be there to get people plugged in the power source. Now, when I came to the Lord, I went through a whole lot of things. I was down at the rock bottom. I was hitting the streets, and I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert, so I was having real problems. But I had to leave the church and find the Lord in my apartment because I almost cursed him because my life was so bad. And I found him in my apartment, and he's the one that helped me to grow and connected me with people that helped out and all like that. That's what I'm listening. I'm saying, well, where's God in our lives? How do we get God in our lives to help us? I look at it like this, and I got this illustration in the book that I wrote, The Gospel Within. You turn on a lamp and the light doesn't come on. You say, okay, maybe it needs a new bulb. You change the bulb, nothing happens. You look down and say, oh, it's not plugged in. Then you plug it in, boom, the light comes on. It's a power source. Yeah. Our power source is God. We're created for his purpose. And this is what I'm teaching and bringing out today as I'm ministering to a lot of people. We got to be connected with our power source. And when we do that, God will work miracles in our lives. I'm not talking about these flashy miracles that people look for. Oh, God has done all this. I'm talking about miracles in our lives. Just even the smallest things. I mean, like, God, I said, I need a blessing today. And my roof was, my gutters were clogged. And I saw a guy in his truck outside, and he had roofing. I said, well, do you do gutter cleaning? He said, no, I don't. He said, but I know a guy who does. And then he came back to my door. He said, look, I'll clean out your gutters. I said, so how much would you want for you to do it? He said, just pay for my gas. And he went up there and cleaned out my gutters. And then, I gave him money for gas. And the Lord, in a little small voice, he said, now you asked for a blessing today. Didn't you get a blessing? Yes, just have my gutters clean. The Lord does the little things in our lives sometimes. That was a miracle, see? And that's why I'm saying, I'm wondering how any of you, as I hear these different things, how do we find out from God or get plugged into God and say, God, you help us, get past these things.
I actually am so glad that you asked that, because that's an important thing. I am working on a study book for church affiliation with this, because one of the populations I really enjoy talking with is churches and congregations. And, pastors, there's a lot of research on the amount of anxiety and depression and just the status they feel they need to portray on top of all of the things going on in life, and the spiritual challenges that come. And so I think no matter what end of the spectrum we're from, a book like this is meant to help you find hope wherever you are. And so when I go to churches, I really feel called to people within churches who feel they need to wear a mask of, I've got this and I'm good. Well, Jesus cried in the Bible, and God, there's anger and there's emotions. And so the first chapter of Life is Tough, that acknowledgement and accepting that, and then believing that it's tolerable, equips us to be ready to find our people. And in the book of Job is the one I reference a lot with the first chapter, that life is tough. You go into the book of Job in the Bible, and he's a great follower, and yet life is tough for him, very challenging. How does he persevere through that? And that is some of the skills of tough is tolerable. And to me, that's the ministry that you're talking about, is reaching those from hard places, is helping them find the belief in the greater them, and in steps that we can help them with. And sometimes little things, we don't have to fix problems. We don't have to fix lives to plant little things. I'm going to say one more thing, Stephen, and then I think we have another question. When I was little, on Sundays, when I was with my dad, I had to go to church. I was required to go to church because it was free food and I was out of the house. I was out of the burden. But the underlying gift there was when I went to church, they smiled at me every day. I was wanted. That's a self-worth that they each were giving me. And my grandma had mints. And I remember the refreshing mints every Sunday. And I remember that 30 years later, how impactful the church was. And that's why I go back to that. And that's where I found a vessel in the church. So never undermine the little things and the power of planting the seeds in the lives of those, particularly from hard places, but really all of us. Thank you, Stephen. I believe Alyssa,
My friend Alyssa has a question, but she's lost her voice. She's not feeling well, so she doesn't have her microphone on. So she sent me this and asked me to ask it of you. She says, my question is, what helped you to get through everything throughout your childhood to adulthood?
Oh, a whole lot of stuff, which is in the book. In the book, as you go through this book, it actually talks about, there's actually there are some stories, but it is more informative and a self-help than a memoir kind of book, which may have a different impression when I present on it. But so what has helped me, I always say little things have helped me, facing challenges and having people challenge those with me. So when I was in foster care, people role modeling good and people role modeling not so good, and helping me learn the difference and that I could be different. And then being okay with not being okay, accepting that it is just tough and that I have the right to my emotions, but I have a lot of power in how I react to them. People teaching me that. And then healing. I went to therapy. And I believe wholeheartedly in therapy, whether it's with a pastor, whether it's in your congregation, a clinical therapist, whatever. At that time in my life, and multiple times in my life, that therapist that I trusted, and trust is so hard and very hard for those from hard places, that I needed to have that trust. And that was one of my people at that time, was a therapist. And then, as you'll read in the book, I had medical as well. And so in simple terms, what I'm going to say is figuring, as you have a need, giving yourself the grace to ask how to meet that need from those people, accepting that you have it, thinking that I can make this through, and I'm going to find people to help me with that need, whether that's grief, depression, trauma, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. That's mine. That's kind of a loaded answer. So retype if you had a specific on it.
No, I think you covered it. I know for me, I have a little bit different answer on that. What got me through a tough childhood is I was so stinking stubborn. I was not gonna let anybody get the best of me. So even when my very tall, very strong grandfather was beating the stuffing out of me, and he would say there would always be some condition, like, okay, if you'll say, I'm sorry, I'll quit hitting you. And so all I think I would have had to do is say, I'm sorry for what, I don't know, but nevertheless, it didn't matter. I would stand there like, you can beat me to death and I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I mean, I just was such a stinker. And so I just was too stubborn, to let anybody.
Rhonda, stubborn, stubborn people, what? No. And so stubbornness are personalities, assessing the personalities of ourselves, those around us, those we work with, whether they're adults. I mean, a lot of these parents, and it took me, and I talk about working in child welfare, it took me quite a while to learn some grace for the parents too. And part of that was because of me. I have resentment. I have anger so to help them, but they come from hard places too. And it's fascinating how we can learn from the challenges that we've had, like Rhonda, of being stubborn. But underlying under all of this, I still feel, yes, as a faith-based person, God as the number one, that self-worth, somewhere, Rhonda, in her personality or in the personality characteristic that she learned, she believed that she was worthy of saying no, of being stronger, of persevering, of making it through. So that self-worth is such a key component to wherever these people are, wherever we are.
That's really good. I didn't think of it that way at that point. But no. I just was not, and still to this day, I say to people who have been through tough stuff, okay, you got that from me. You took that from me then. I'm not going to give you one more minute. I get 1,440 minutes every single day, and I'm not going to give a single one of them to people who have harmed me. You got what you got, but you're not going to get anything else from me. So it's, you know, a little bit different approach, but you're right. It's all in our personality. But the beautiful thing is God knows exactly what we need to get us through. And we each have an aspect of our personality that will get us through tough times. Dawn, you want to,
yeah, hopefully it doesn't cut me out.
No,
I was gonna say that I think I have a different viewpoint on that too. When I was growing up, how I got through it wasn't very healthy. I just kind of stuffed it, and I was just like, okay, what can I do next to get through this day? And I think for me now as a grown adult, that doesn't always work. That is not healthy. We have to find a different way to cope and a different way to get through it. So I just wanted to say that it was just, I mean, sometimes it was humor. I mean, I still have humor too, but a lot of it was just moving on, like saying, oh, I don't need to deal with it. Like, you know, Amber said earlier, you know, we don't think we need to deal with it, but we do. So that's something that I did, was I kind of just like, I'm going to push that aside for right now. I'm going to push forward, and I'm going to use humor and move forward that way.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing it. And, you know, that was probably more me. I was a people pleaser and compliant. And there was moments of stubbornness, which I talk about in the book, Rhonda, like when I was going to school in college, and I had no driver's license because I had seizures and I was on medications, and I was reliving my past all of a sudden as an adult, because why were we not properly informed that at 18, our childhood is not over? I mean, don't we all think that's going to happen? And then it didn't. And I realized this. And I realized, wow, that past is still there. And I have the worth to address it for me. Doesn't matter what my parents are going to get out of it. It doesn't matter what these other people are going to get out of it. I need it for me. And that's being vulnerable. And, you know, people like us from hard places, or who work in hard places. My husband's in law enforcement. I was in social work. We're used to, I've got this. I'm doing this as moms. I've got this as dads. I'm going to provide. I've got this. No, sometimes we don't. And that's okay, because that's when we can use these.
Well, that's so good. So we've got 4 minutes left. I want to honor everybody's time by ending right on time, but I don't want to leave anybody out. Anybody that has any questions or comments, unmute yourself. And okay, let's see, Amber, you good? You put your website in the chat. It's amberjewell with 2 L's.org. If you want to get your copy of Finding Hope, go to Amber's website, and that way you'll get a signed copy. And any questions? No? Okay. Well, we are cooking up some really awesome future Love is Action meetings. And so stay tuned for those. You'll get an email announcing them. And so we're so grateful for each one of you. We're grateful for everybody who watches this video and, you know, and is connected with us. We want to, we ask you to share, subscribe. We want more people to become involved with this. We're volunteer-led nonprofit organization. So we're not asking for money. We're not asking for anything other than, you know, let's all kind of come together here, although it's virtual, but, you know, thank God for the technology to be able to come together virtually from literally all over the country here and just show love. And when we give love to others without expecting anything in return, it will splash back up on us. It may not come from the difficult person that you're trying to show love to, but somehow or other, you know, God makes arrangements. You cannot give love away without it coming back to you. You just can't. So for resources, downloadable free stuff, for addressing societal ills in your community, to stop child sex trafficking, to prevent suicides, to help people with substance disorder. There's so many resources on our website. Go to loveisaction.com. Download anything, share anything that would be helpful to you or people in your community. So Amber, you want to wrap us up?
Oh, I just want to say thank you to everybody. And there was a question about if I'm always positive. I just want you all to know I'm a believer in better. And that's where my hope perseveres, through the fact that I've been able to find it through people like you, that I can have hope in the future and hope in greater things, even when in the moment I am not happy or not positive or well, because that's real too. And I really just hope that you all know, with a pun and genuineness, that the little things you do can be super powerful in ways that you may never know, or might come out to find later. So believe in what you're doing and keep being the awesome people you were created to be. Miss Rhonda?
That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, we have one more thing. So Alyssa says, what's the best thing that happened to you through your life so far? What a great question. And this is a great place to end. Jesus.
Yes.
That's my one word answer. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. I am not joking. And I know for a lot of people, you know, that probably sounds like the most ridiculous thing. I was raised by atheists, so I speak fluent atheism. I speak fluent agnostic. And I'm just going to tell you, yeah, this guy who was here 2,000 years ago, he really is alive in my heart right now. I know he is in yours, Amber and Jenny and Stephen. And when you ask Jesus in, buckle up, Buttercup, because if you really give your life to Jesus, he will take you places that you can't even imagine. And there's not time for me to tell you because I'm old. I've been here a long time. I have experiences that when I was homeless and 8 years old, sleeping in the park and, you know, hungry for days, I could not possibly have imagined, and I have a good imagination. I couldn't have imagined what God would do, and he's done it. So give Jesus a shot. I always say, you know, if nothing happens, you could always go back, but you never will, because, you know, when you really and truly give your life over, you would never want to go back to life without faith. So thank you all. It's 9:02. I'm gonna let you go. Thank you. See you again second Friday of next month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.